Hello and welcome to the Property and Investor Podcast. This is the podcast where I speak to some of the most interesting, inspiring, and resilient people in property investing and beyond. I, of course, am your host, Paul Lamphere. Now, as you know, my inner lawyer requires me to say a few words before we get started, which is nothing in the podcast can be considered financial, legal, or health advice. And there is nothing in this podcast that would amount to an endorsement of any kind of investment strategy at all. Do your own research. Of course, you know this anyway. I'm really delighted to introduce today's guest. Jay, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Paul.
Now, you are very, very well known in the property space for kind of being it's the wizard of auctions too much, but being like a genuine true through and through expert in the auction space. You've written books on the subject, you do trainings on the subject, you are often called upon to write articles or comment on social media on the auction space. So it's pretty clear to us that you are a man to speak to about getting the auction perspective on where we are now. So look, very warm welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Now, obviously, I've been doing my research, Jay, and I always start the podcast off on the same vein, asking people for their origin story. And we've met a few times in different kind of environments. And I remember we met at a charity do and various other events. Having now, and I obviously know you through the auction space, so having now done a bit of research, I have so many questions, Jay. I have so many questions because you've got a really interesting journey from what I've been able to pick up, and there are parts of it I'm just so intrigued by. So I'm going to shut up and I'm going to hand over to you, and I'd be really interested if you could just start from the beginning and give us a bit of your origin story. I think I always say this: context is really important. So, what is your context? Who are your parents? Where were you brought up? What was this journey into property? And then we can, then we'll get into the here and now and talk auctions and talk markets and talk property and all the rest of it. But over to you, my friend. Give us a bit of the origin story.
Okay, so it all started October 7th, 1907. It's an interesting story because my family are immigrants. So they came at the turn of the last century to the UK as political religious asylum seekers, essentially. Mm-hmm. And that came in two parts. So on my mother's side, going as far back as we can count without the Russians and the Germans destroying all of the literature around our heritage, is Polish-Russian. And that's my mother's side, and Jewish. And on the other side of that, so running up the mother's side, but my mother's father's side are Italian. And they kind of met, my grandmother and my grandfather met in London. And my grandfather was obviously, and this was after World War II, obviously. This was in the 50s that they had met. And he was an immigrant as well. He was running a couple of restaurants, so he worked like two jobs. He was a maitre d', very humble, very poor beginnings, that side of the family. And on my father's side, they've probably been in London in the UK since 1066. The Howard name is printed somewhere.
New William the Conqueror, that kind of thing.
You picture a battle with spears and stuff, and you're good to go. It's a very wide ranging mixed heritage. So like the Polish, the Russian, the Italian, the English. It's created what this looks like, and I've got no idea what that is, but this is what we have. This is the amalgamation of multiculturalism in Europe. But that context kind of comes. So when my mother met my father, she told me the story. She met him in a club, and Lionel Richie was playing in the background. You know, hello, is it me you're looking for? So my dad, being a total cheese beast, turned around and just sang the lyrics to her. Apparently that worked. I don't know how much that would work these days, but it definitely worked in the early 80s. So outside like the familial stuff, one side of the family is
We
quite
should just pause
wealthy,
this to acknowledge just exactly how smooth that was. I mean,
super smooth.
that was really
I
smooth.
I imagine him just kind of like sliding in and just going,
Yeah,
"Is it me you're looking for?" I can see it.
that deserves
Yeah.
to be an element of a film at some point, doesn't it? Anyway, I interrupted. Carry on.
No. So I mean, that was kind of that was the family setting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then obviously, you know, I was born in Hammersmith, which is a lovely part of London.
Mm-hmm.
And then within 3 to 4 years of being born, my mother and my father split. So I was brought up in a single parent household on a council estate in West London, which I'm positive has built character. So, um, and there were plenty of opportunities to go off the rails, or you know, not pursue good things for the right reason, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And one of those was really, I was a very awkward child. I'd never really understood peers. I don't think they really understood me. There was a lot of bullying. Um, I did my first degree. Started my first degree at the age of 11. So I
What?
was really outpacing quite a lot of people around my age. And it made me peculiar, and I didn't understand it, and no one really understood me. And that was a degree in psychology. I finished that degree at 13, and some of the wealthiest side of the family that you know we're related to, but you know, kind of very much keep things separate. There's politics in this, and I don't really understand them even today.
Mm-hmm.
Started to kind of like take notice. So I finished this first degree, and I was moving on to my second degree, which was classics. Um, and I was looking for just like weekend work and summer holiday work, etc., etc. And one member of the family basically said, well, why don't you come and work for us in our real estate business? So I thought nothing of it, and they paid fairly well. It was real kind of. There was not an ounce of nepotism that could be measured for a 50-mile radius of where I was sitting. Like
Mm-hmm.
they were no friendlier to me than they were to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think they kind of held me to a harder standard. Um, then my mother passed away, and I was looking after my younger brother who's got some disabilities. So learning disabilities, functional disabilities, blah, blah, blah. And then I kind of had a bit of a breakdown. I think at that time I was about 18 or 19. Um, I struggled with that a little bit. But I was always doing working in estate agencies or investment agency. I worked with the family trust, which had X number of billions in assets, not just real estate, but globally. And I managed a fraction of it, just over 3 billion, which was real estate in Europe, so UK and Europe, and a little bit in South America, which has got some really funny stories to it that I still can't imagine. I have no idea I was part of it. So, but that was good. And then I kind of thought, right, I need to have a marketable degree, something that's going to make me employable. Because clearly, I didn't do the doctorate level with psychology, and I didn't do doctorate level with classics to specialize in specific time scale, or you know, or a specific discipline. So then I did a law degree.
I saw that. I saw
Yeah.
that. Let's pause on the law degree because I do want to go there, given the our sort of shared history of both doing law degrees. But if we can just like take one step back, and you mentioned like when you sort of turned 18, obviously you'd encountered like really serious tragedy at that point. You know, you'd lost your mum,
Yes.
and you were kind of caring for your brother by the sounds of it, and it sounds like the family home had fallen. Had kind of had separated earlier on in that process as well. So you described like having, you know, a bit of a breakdown. I mean, just hovering over that, what does that look like? What does that mean?
I was almost entirely non-functional. So,
Okay.
I think there were times where I didn't even get out of bed, let alone washed, and it sounds gross, but I think everything kind of felt like it was overwhelming, and I
Mm-hmm.
think I was struggling to get over the whelm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it was, but some family stepped in. Um, I was becoming really very self-destructive, like super self-destructive,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I was intelligent enough to know I didn't like the person I was becoming,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of thought, at that time, this is early to mid 2000s, so this is before the whole, you know, boys can't, boys. This was all the boys can't cry or men just have to deal with it kind of thing. There was no healthy medical or mindset advice or mental
Yeah,
health kind of stuff that
yeah,
was
yeah.
out there. It was kind of like, this has happened. There's not a damn thing I can do about any of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have to rise up from the ashes.
Mm-hmm.
There was no other option available, not that I could see anyway. So I made the best of several really bad situations.
And do you remember at that moment, was there any step or sequence of steps that helped you transition out of what must have been a dark and challenging place? Um, was there anything that kind of acted as a catalyst to help you kind of raise yourself up out of that dark place?
Yes, I don't. Yes, but I don't know how appropriate I don't know how appropriate it is for a podcast.
Interesting.
I basically oh fucking hell. So the honest answer is that I was sexually active from a rather young age,
Okay.
and I then, almost like an addiction, found sex an addiction. And
Okay.
then that got me to get out of bed. That got me to make sure I was washed and cleaned. It got me to do all these different types of things. And I basically, for about 6 years, turned into an unmitigated disaster of a whore of a man. Um, and I
Yeah,
think
just to be really clear, I did not see us going down this path. But anything that makes the boat move faster, Jay, anything that gets us out
it
of
pulled
bed.
it sex really did pull me out of a really dark place. And then I joined a couple of international sex clubs. This was all before I was married and met my wife, just make sure that's out there before people think I'm a total
Good,
bastard.
good.
But no, I was free, single, and doing more than mingle. Um, and Yeah, that really got me out of it all. And then it became problematic because then I took it to an extreme, or I took the whole, I kind of I didn't really value sex. I didn't really value myself, and I was just doing things because I enjoyed uh, the release of the hormones
Hmm.
and the bits to kind of. And I was still a horny teenager going into my early 20s, so I kind of try and give myself a bit of spare. This is good. This is so bad. But yeah, that's what got me out of a really dark, depressive state. I just
But that all makes complete sense. Do you know what the answer to that question really reminds me of, Jay? When I was at bar school, one of the mantras at bar school was never ask a question you do not already know the answer to. That was not the answer I was expecting, but I absolutely love it. So we now know what got you out of that dark place. Where should we pick the story back up? College of Law. So you then went off to do a law degree. Tell us about that.
yes. So I was obviously I'd lost my mother. I pretty much I don't know how I passed my like my A levels, like that kind of GCSE A level kind of stuff, and I appalling results. But I went and had an interview with a guy called Sir Malcolm Davies at Thames Valley University, which is now the University of West London. I
Okay.
don't think he's still there. And he was basically the head honcho for the law department.
Right.
And he asked me why I wanted to study law. And I said, well, I'm a bit of an argumentative prick. And he said, well, okay, that's a good start. I said, and I hyper focus on specific details, and I like to pull things to pieces and see how they work and put them back together again. I love looking for advantage. I like seeing how I like using language to manipulate things, which is probably not the most responsible way to say things, but language is the main tool to manipulate anything. And he gave me a chance. I had to sit an entry exam, which was basically 3 questions, not knowing really anything about the law or studying at A level or doing anything like that. And then based off the back of that, he let me in, and hopefully he didn't regret it. But I finished the law degree there with a 2-1. I think I could have got a first if I wasn't so entrenched in seeking out naked women. And at university, it was kind of like fishing with dynamite. It was ridiculous. And I was earning a fair bit of money doing what I was doing, working with family in the real estate business. I was making more than a fair bit of money. So being the cocky late teen, early 20 arsehole that I was splashing the cash and smashing the gash, as they say. Probably don't release that bit. But I had a really good time, and I think if I wasn't completely obsessed with naked women at the time, I probably could have got a first. I feel like I had that in me because I'd gotten a first in the past, so I knew it wasn't beyond me. And yeah, then I thought, well, okay, I've got the LLB. Let me see if I can do the practitioner certificate, the LPC. So I went to the London College of Law, Gooch Street, which still makes me giggle, just the word Gooch. But I was there, and I did that in the evening so I could work during the day. So it's kind of how I funded myself through that. And yeah, that's my law story. I was doing a training contract, but that all went wrong massively. It was connected to the family, and I had a falling out with the family. And it was also connected to the fact that I may have done something not great with one of the partner's wives. But without really, I didn't know it was the partner's wife is essentially the defense that I've stood by for.
I think let's not delve into the detail of that, Jay.
No.
So that was kind of the legal training, and obviously brought it to a conclusion. I suppose as a question, an observation I have of myself is that the legal training that I had and the practice that I did has really helped in the property space for me. I mean, if anything, if it's one of the most boring bits of life advice I ever give to anybody, but if anybody genuinely looks me in the eyes and says, give me a piece of life advice, my life advice is always read the contract. In every aspect of life. I know we double click on everything now and we don't care, but if it's an important decision in life and they send you the contract, lock yourself away in a room with a ruler and a red pen. Do not leave that room until you understand every single word of that contract. So I suppose throwing that over to you, have you found a benefit of having a legal understanding, a legal framework when you're approaching the work that you've done in property and the auctions and all the rest of it?
Without a shadow of a doubt, 100%. I mean, I think that the 2 biggest overlaps in skill set and ability to disseminate information is if you come from a high point in finance, you'll understand real estate investment, you'll understand property investment, you'll get the numbers, it will work. If you come from a legal background, you are going to understand what's on offer, essentially, how best to kind of structure that, and how to move things forward in a very kind of methodical, practical sense. And with auctions, you have to, I mean, the 2 things I see big at auction where people fall down is they don't read the legal pack. They don't read the special conditions. And when they do, They're terrified to ask questions, to quantify something, to clarify something. And the reason for that is I think people don't want to look stupid. Everybody's got this whole bravado and this mask on where they're like, oh, no, I'm an established investor. I don't need to ask such a basic. Ask the basic question. Even if you feel like you sound stupid or you look stupid, it's fine, because we don't realize is when you ask someone what you perceive to be a stupid question, you're actually disarming them, right? You're making them explain something that, and I think that's really important. But the transferable skills are immense. That I can go through an auction legal pack and say whether this is a good, bad, or indifferent very quickly. I can then lay down in very short terms a set of questions I want to ask my solicitor and or the auctioneers, the seller's solicitor, to know that if I get those responses, I know this is a green light and I can do the deal, and I can make sure that we don't lose money. And that's our primary goal. Don't lose money, return the initial investment, and then worry about everything else after that.
Yeah, plan A, don't lose money. Plan B, observe rule 1.
Yes. I mean, if you don't get into double digits repeating that rule, then you've missed something, right? Yeah. Plan 3, have you listened to plan 1 and 2? Okay. Just keep ticking that off the sheet.
And I think it's a really valuable point you ask about, you make about ask the stupid question. So I have various rules I have 3 rules of the podcast, one of which is always ask the stupid question, because I'm willing to admit that there have been periods of my life where I have smiled and nodded through meetings and I didn't really fully understand what was going on, and I should have done, and I should have had the courage to say, actually, I don't fully understand what you're talking about. I do need you to run that past me in words of 1 syllable. And I'm pleased to say I'm now at a stage in life where I just don't care, and I will ask the stupid question. But I also notice that, like, property meetings, particularly ones that I host, is people are a little bit kind of reluctant, if they're really reasonably new to property, to kind of stick their heads above the parapet, even to show up sometimes, which I find understandable and frustrating in equal measure. But I always say the new kind of the newbie questions, which are positioned as, oh, this is a stupid question, often aren't. They're actually often really insightful, because they cut through the nonsense and they make people explain how things work. And it's really fascinating, because I have this theory that if you can't explain something in 3 sentences, then either you don't know what you're talking about, or you're actively concealing what you'd like to actively conceal the truth. And the stupid question, I think, just is a beautiful thing that opens lots of doors for everybody at the meeting, I think.
It's that Einstein effect, right? It's if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough. Right? And there's a lot of people that want to overcomplicate things. And yes, there are complicated things, but if you can't explain the complicated things simply, that someone can get a grasp, then I can't hear what you're saying. It starts to kind of fuzz and buzz, and I switch off. It happens a lot.
Drill down now into kind of your property experience. Obviously, you started working at the kind of the family trust with 3-point-something billion under management. I mean, that's just astonishing, isn't it? But you're obviously really well known for the work in the auction space. So how did you transition from there to being, an expert in the auction space and having all the experience that you now have?
Well, I don't do delayed gratification at all very well. If I was stuck in a room and someone said, here's a marshmallow, but if I come back in half an hour and it's still there, I'll give you a second marshmallow. Before they've even walked away, I would have headbutted the table to get that marshmallow in my mouth. And auctions do not delay gratification in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
There is an absolute beauty in the symmetry and the simplicity of an auction, because you know exactly what you're getting for. If you open your eyes, you know exactly what you're getting for. Pre-COVID, every 6 to 7 weeks, there would be a barrage of catalogs, emails being sent out. Here's our latest catalog. Here's 100, 200, 300 plus properties. It's like going into Woolworths as a kid and looking at that wall of sweets and going, fill your boots. Because that's exactly what that means. It's like, no, you don't have to do all this estate agency stuff and subject twos and and options and all this fannying about that you don't actually. How long does it take you to do that deal? You know, I know someone who's very established trader. You know, the longest time it's taken him to get a deal across the line is 24 months. I'd lose interest. I have deal commitment issues. I can't be that involved for that length of time. I just can't do it. And you know, when you work for the family trust, all you're doing is maintaining existing stock, decreasing leverage, increasing return. You know, whether that's with planning, whether that's with re-gearing a commercial lease, you learn all of these things. It's great. It is deathly boring. It is. I mean, the numbers sound exciting, but it's deathly boring.
Yeah.
But trading was fun. Trading was sexy. So since 2002, I've either been buying for myself on trades or buying for, it was 2 or 3 clients at the time, retained clients, and I would buy for them, which, you know, back in the day, there wasn't really a word for it, but it was deal packaging, essentially. No. And I was super successful at that. I mean, I was really not very responsible with money. It was a good thing that I got married and settled down and started behaving, because I'm much better with money now. But pretty much every penny that was coming in was going out. It was, I would go on like weekend flights to the lakes in Italy with some random bird that I'd met in a club the night before. I'd be doing stupid that you do not do this stuff. It was a ton of fun at the time, but resulted in nothing, right? It was all transitory. It was all kind of a moments in time that passed. And I guess I still do stuff like that. We don't really retain anything. Everything that we buy, we trade. It comes in, it goes out. And I like that symmetry. You know, it's that double accounting method. You know, oh, you've made something here, you've accounted for it here. It just goes in and out. It's really very nice.
And does that continue this day? So in terms of your investment profile, are you still always trading rather than having a retained portfolio?
I mean, I would say I lied a little bit. We have one property. You can't even call it a property. We have a brick wall that we own in Fulham, an advertising hoarding that we've owned. We're coming up to the 3rd year, and we use it for we use it because we've got some advertising on it that kind of feeds into our business. Are you looking to sell your property auction? That's the advert. And then someone can scan the QR code, come through to our business. So in that respect, it's a nothing. It's one wall, and it's not even the entire wall. It's X number of millimeters into the brickwork and the brickwork itself that we own. The rest of it's somebody else's. So you're like everything else trades.
Pure trader. So just have you ever done a Roger Hamilton's wealth dynamics test?
Yes. Yeah.
And do you know what your profile pinged out as a in that context?
I would have to find the report.
I would guess you would be a trader, because you know it's you clearly have mastered the art of both the buying and the selling, which is the big challenge, isn't it? Like, some people are very good at buying because they're very shrewd, but they have no access to market. They have no one to pass on the project to. But you're
so my business partner is a trader mechanic. Is that the what are the quadrants? Because I remember from the quadrants.
So kind of. There is no hierarchy to them, but I'll start at the top of the square, which is creator, star, supporter, deal maker, trader, Warren Buffett, who's accumulator, Lord, mechanic.
Yeah,
but
so
you sound exactly pretty much a perfect trader by the sounds of it.
Yeah, so I think it was probably, I don't know, it was quite in that top quadrant. So it was kind of like that, the star creator with deal maker. So it kind of was like an arrow like that. Yeah, it's a strange one. But I think the creative side and the deal maker side are the transferable skills that make me a good trader. But yeah, my business partner Piotr, he's the trader mechanic. So he's a pure-blooded trader, 100%.
And just pausing for breath and just hovering there. So I suppose, you know, obviously you have a family. Obviously, you know, you're happily married, and so how does that work? Like, how do you manage the downside risk if you are constantly trading properties and there is always the possibility that something unforeseen will happen to you. So how do you manage that downside risk? If you bother to manage it at all, you may not bother to manage it because you know it may not be on your radar at this stage in life.
Uh, um, the downside risk is I don't the downside risks would be risks that people in different positions would apply to my situation, rather than there being any downside. I mean, if anything happens to me, there are insurances and things like that would
Cool.
cover anything and all that, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But if our business was to implode tomorrow, or we bought 4 or 5 wrong deals at the wrong time and left too much behind, and the worst case scenario is I'll get a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
I'm not so stuffed with pride that I wouldn't be able to stack shelves at Tesco's.
Yeah.
If I
I think
needed to
before
or
you
had
go
to.
to Tesco's, I think there'd probably be a few people who would engage your services in the property space, let's be honest. So
Yeah, probably.
let's be honest. In fact, I probably know a couple of those people. So let's dive into this. So before I get your kind of take on the current market, which I really want to, just give us the mountaintop summary of like your auction experience, because you've really done it. So give us kind of I suppose the auction CV, like what have you done in the auction space, and bring us up to the current time.
So between 2008 and 2012, I was buying and selling for myself and for clients at auction because it was quick, it was guaranteed. I understood the mechanics, so it was easy. Then in 2013, I started working in I started working in an international finance kind of capacity. So I stepped out of property for a year. And then in 2014, 17th of February 2014, I started working for Auction House London. And I started as an administrator. So not in the sales side, not in the deal side, but just in the making sure everything happened, the logistics, the processes, the management of the auction, blah, blah, blah. And within about 14 months, I became auction manager. And then every single transaction that transpired from that point through to February 2020, every single transaction had to go through me. That's every single pre-purchase, post-purchase, every auction transaction, every seller, every buyer, both sides solicitors, everything had to cross my desk, had to be dealt with me in one way, shape or form. And the experience of that was immense. Then I had my daughter. We had concerns that there were some issues. It wasn't, she was in intensive care, baby intensive care unit. And there were some other situations that came up. And I thought, right, I was feeling like I was burning out, but I still had plenty of steam left in me. I've fallen down many times before, and I didn't feel like I was close to falling down again. That feeling, you can anticipate that feeling. That feeling doesn't change drastically. And then I was kind of headhunted by Auction House UK, which is the franchisor for the Auction House brand that operates nationally. And my work there was as business development director to increase the number of corporates that were working with us, to work with the individuals on a region by region basis to help them improve their business, just to bring in some extra money. And I did that, I think, until August the following year. But at the time, that was part-time, and I was working from home doing that. So for the other half of the time, myself and Piotr, my business partner, we wrote the book together before the Hammer Falls. Were just setting up processes and practices for the businesses that we wanted to run, that we were doing as well. And that includes like Hammered, where we help people sell their property, agnostically. We will take property in the proposition and we'll put that with the best auctioneer possible, because you call up any auctioneer, they're the best person to deal with the sale of the property. Practically speaking, some do better with certain assets in certain areas than others. And that's not a criticism to say, oh, they're a bad auctioneer because X, Y, and Z, but you want to be putting the property with the active database, looking for those kind of units or that kind of stock. And then we started the Auction Buyers Club, which was almost accidental, but it's turned out to be probably one of the more engaging and exciting things that we do, that I find that we do. And on top of that, we still trade. So we kind of got those three hats that we operate from. And all of that is, every business that we operate at the moment is auction centric. And the progression of that is to create an ecosystem around the auctions to make them more accessible, to make it easier for people to buy and for people to sell. We're very far away from the goal that we want to achieve, but I think we're working in the right direction. That's really exciting. So from 2007, consistently auctions focused, but from 2002 is where I started.
Take us then into your perspective. So obviously, you know, with your knowledge, with all this stuff that you have going on in the auction space, I feel like you've got a very unique perspective, because I think the auctions tell us things that the rest of the market doesn't. I think it's, in my view, and you may disagree with me, I think it's kind of the early warning system. It's like the portal into the future is looking at what's going on in the auction space. Full disclosure, I am a fan of the auction space. So we have both bought and sold properties in the auction, and with 100% level of happiness. So I think there are a lot of myths in the auction space. Every property we've ever sold in the auction has sold for exactly to the penny what we wanted it for. You know, it's like happy days, and they send you the money through the post. It's like,
yeah.
You know, and there's a lot of nonsense in the property space, which I'm not going to delve into, but there's so much nonsense in the property space. When you want a transaction completed, the auction is definitely an avenue for just sudden death. And if you've got your cards, if you've organized yourself, that's really what you want as both a buyer and a seller. Anyway, with that sort of disclosure out of the way, what are you seeing, Jay? So, you know, tell us what's going on in the market. Tell us what you're seeing. Gaze into your crystal ball into the future as well, if you like. Like, what are you seeing?
Well, it's funny. The day that we're recording this now, there's about 1,000 properties going for auction today, across all of the auctions, and in the next 10 days, it's close to 4,000 properties. So it's a big time. Some of the things that's really interesting at the moment is the number of properties that are going to auction has increased drastically, almost like by a quarter, by 26%. That can mean anything. That can mean anything. But if you take that 26% and you go, okay, what is that 26% made up of? Well, it's made up of former investment stock, like big emphasis on former. The majority is housing, former buy-to-let, investment producing, yield producing investment. So why is it going to auction vacant? Well, I mean, we don't have to pull that thread too hard to say, well, you've got all of the investors that, you know, have been ignoring, Section 24. You've got all of the investors that have been ignoring all the noise about EPCs, all of the noise about the eviction rights and all of that changing stuff. You'll have all the investors that have been ignoring, you know, the interest rate rises and moving from X% above base, which was what, 0.5 or 1%, to now being, okay, you need 7%. That's your rates. So you need to be bringing in more than that under the rental stress test for us to lend to you. Well, I mean, the writing's on the wall. I mean, the way that everything has panned out hasn't worked well for the government, hasn't worked well for the bank, hasn't worked well for society, because landlords, if you ignore all of the social media about eat the rich and landlords are the devil incarnate, landlords provide a massive service to the country. They provide housing. And you could argue some are better quality than others, yeah. But you can look at social housing, you can look at housing association. The number of housing association stock that comes to the market that still has bathrooms from the 70s in it is beyond shocking. And I know private investors that would look at that and go, I would never rent something in that condition to a tenant, to a family. I never would. So, you know, it swings and roundabouts, but the reality is that stock is being vacated sharply. You know, more than 58% of the increase of properties, that's 25 to 26% increase in stock. 58% of that 26% is vacant residential that was formerly let from retiring landlords. And obviously, you're going to have the naturally retiring because age comes into it. But there are other, if you take the age out of it, okay, maybe they're coming off a fixed term. That's going to push them across the line. Maybe they're just not structured correctly. Maybe they haven't incorporated. Again, like you say, this isn't financial advice. Maybe incorporation isn't right for you, but I know a lot of people have incorporated to offset costs and to make sure things still work. But that is a massive chunk. Second to that is vacant flats. The number of vacant flats coming to auction. Normally, you'd see vacant flats coming to auction the last couple of years because there was an ESW1 issue. And for a longer period of time,
for the benefit of the podcast, just clarify what that issue is.
Oh, so the ESW1 is cladding. So from the catastrophe at Grenfell, has put a big issue around the kind of materials that you clad these flats with. So you have to get an ESW1 certificate to say, oh, this isn't highly flammable cladding, right? Which is what the problem was, or the cladding passes certain requirements or testing. Because the majority of flats that you'd see in auction would be short lease flats, or flats that had very, very low frictional costs. And I say flats with low frictional costs because flats have additional frictional costs to other properties because they've got the ground rent and the service charge, which is enforced. I mean, if you're buying a house, of all the money that you're making every year, you're setting aside an element for fittings and making sure that it's in a good state of repair. So, people like to make a big deal that the flats have the additional amount, but if you're running your portfolio correctly, you're creating that ground rent service charge in the background for your freehold stock. You want to make sure that everything's in good condition. You're checking the roof, the boiler, the pipes, the blah, 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 blah. So you're seeing more of that coming to the market vacant. The doubling ground rents has been an issue and remains an issue. A lot of those coming to auction. Those are very difficult to fund. They're very easy to fix if you know how, but you need to be cash rich to start with to solve those issues. For me, the best way to deal with the doubling ground rent is to extend the lease. Because the moment you extend the lease, you're extending the lease under the new laws. And you can't double a ground rent, you can't charge a ground rent. So it's an easy way to fix it, but there are frictional costs and there's timelines that you have to take in place. So there are still issues in the market. There's still issues with the type of properties going in there. But if you were to consider the auction market as being an investor playground for the last 300 years, now the majority of stock that's going in there is vacant. Which works for your buy, refurbish, refinance, rent, resell, your borrow model, whichever one of the R's you'd like to take out of that. But for people that are portfolio holders, the auctions were a great place to pick up an income producing asset already warm. It comes into your portfolio producing a return. And now there's a lot more work involved, and I think that has impacted values. That's impacted sales rates, and that is very clear, at least over the last 18 months, that's been an impact.
So everything we've ever sold at auction has been tenanted because it was sold as an investment proposition, and it's good to go. Why are landlords who are exiting their portfolios going through, frankly, the faff of giving notice to a tenant, and the, I suppose, the unnecessary disruption of that tenant's life as well to remove them from a property? Why aren't they putting them why are they putting them in auctions vacant rather than tenanted?
Well, it's for faff, really. You have to kind of decide who's going to be picking up the aggravation. Let's say you're an investor and you're looking to buy something at auction. It's tenanted, so you have a look in the legal pack. There's no EICRs, there's no confirmation of the right to rent, there's no confirmation they've had the boiler certificate. I don't really do residential stuff. So they all of the checks necessary that if that tenant decides to stop paying or becomes problematic or starts breaking down walls, that you cannot follow the the not so streamlined or cost effective process of evicting them, right?
Yeah.
That stuff isn't there. So as an investor looking at something, okay, well, that's great. It's a 12% yield or 16% yield on a 3-bedroom terraced house in Leeds. Great. 16% sounds great in that area. I'll take it. But there is no conceivable way for me to onboard this tenant in a compliant way. So then what we started seeing for about 3 or 4 months was the tenanted stock just wasn't selling. Because the risk to the buyers, the incoming investors, was I'm buying a problem.
Yeah.
And the yield is not enough to convince me that I can solve this problem without, a lot of aggravation. Because when you're portfolio building, one of the reasons we primarily look at commercial property is because there is almost no aggravation. There is aggravation, but it's not I lost my key down the pub on Saturday night when I woke up in a ditch on Sunday morning. I can't get in. Or, the boiler pilot light's gone out. Can you send somebody with a hydronics degree to come and fix it out? Or the sink is leak. I come out in hives at the thought of having to deal with those phone calls. And you have to. There are people that are, I know so many investors that managing those situations, having a good relationship with their tenant, is their absolute strong point. No, not mine. It's not my strong point. I'm terrible at stuff like that. Because if it was my own, I would just deal with it. And you can't expect people to deal with that. And I get that. I understand that. But yeah, you get a bad tenant. If you're buying an HMO, for instance, you're compacting the 1 tenant issue with a 6 or 7 tenant issue. And I think it was becoming very, very clear very early on that, hold on, okay, I'm getting the yield, it's an incoming asset, blah, 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 blah. But what if this isn't compliant? What if that isn't compliant? What if I can't do X? What if I can't do? Then all of a sudden, the issue, the risk, the downside risk, as you mentioned earlier on in the podcast, becomes huge. And almost insurmountable for the sake of what? A netted down 5% yield.
Okay. So that obviously makes complete sense. So if we were just to take the temperature of the market today, which is Wednesday, the 20th of September, are we in a buyer's market or a seller's market? What's your...
We should be in a buyer's market because the supply is outstripping demand. When the supply increases by a full quarter, 25% plus, and the results are dropping 10-15% on average, there's a big issue there. It should be a buyer's market.
So who are the buyers? Or put it a different way, and obviously I'm not asking you necessarily to reveal your secret sauce at this point, Jay, but where do we, if we're looking from here towards the end of 2023, early 2024 onwards, like where is the opportunity, specifically in the auction space, if you're coming to it as a buyer?
Yeah, so I think and the opportunities are really how you are positioned rather than the asset that you're buying. Obviously, price point is huge. But if you are positioned as someone who is like, right, okay, this is what I've done this for the last 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. I am positioned in such a way where I have access to either cash, or I can draw down on my existing portfolio, or you've got an effective team in place that can handle fast transactions. Then yeah, you can attack the auctions and you can steal 100%. You can steal. It'll be almost daylight robbery. But if you are constrained by increased interest, you're not structured proficiently in terms of perhaps you haven't got a specific company set up for trading. You've only got your buy-to-let thing. You haven't bought mixed use or commercial before. You're not VAT registered if you're buying commercial that's selected for VAT or TOGC, transfer of going concern, if the commercial property is let. If you are not structured correctly, then you're going to have hurdles that you're going to fall down on. And sellers are always going to be demanding that little bit more from people who aren't structured correctly, who can't do the deal. But if you are structured, and that comes down to how you present yourself, and that's not just confidence, it's about saying this is what we're looking to do. This is how we've come to our figures. We can move on this deal today. This is a best and final offer. This is if you agree, we will exchange today. The sellers and buyers appreciate, and they don't realize this, but they appreciate the speed and certainty of the auction.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you want your ego stroked as a seller, you can't sell at auction. It's impossible. If you want someone to turn around and go, look, this may be your expectation, but this is a reality. It goes above that, happy days, but this is your reality. Mm-hmm. Then you know where you stand. It's probably why you've had a good experience in auction, right? Because someone's turned around and go, yeah, that's nice, but this is your reality. If we get you here, this is a good day for you. And you're like, well, actually, looking at the numbers, that is a good day. There is more of that available. There is a deal at the moment. I've ignored 2 phone calls, but that will work in the favor for the deal, I'm sure. Let me just have a quick look if they're effing and blinding yet. No, he's still being polite. Can you speak? Not yet, Jimmy, not yet. So there's a couple of deals where, you know, interestingly, this one, it's a block of flats is in one auction and the commercial is in another auction. So the commercial's been pulled out of the auction and the residential auction is taking place today. But we're not going to miss that yet. But I've got a buyer who will buy the both combined for X. And now we're tossing and turning over 10 grand in 4 weeks. So the way that we're structuring the deal is I will give you your additional 10 grand, but you will give me an additional 4 weeks. That will make it easier to find the finance, to get the surveys, to kind of structure it in the best way possible. And the buyer is predominantly cash, but we'll finance from day one, because why keep all the cash tied up when you can play with other fun things. I mean, the temperature of the market, before I get too distracted with other stories, the temperature of the market, I would say, is lukewarm.
Okay.
Last month there were some very good auctions that achieved results, just crazy results. And then this month there's been some real strugglers, auctions that I wouldn't have thought would have, you know, not sold the amount of properties that they hadn't sold. As another principle, whenever we're making an offer, we make an offer in 2 places. So we'll do an underwrite offer and we'll do a cash now offer. And I would say it's been about a year since we've got an underwrite across the line. Now, that's not the end of the world, because A, they're very, very rare, because a lot of vendors don't know about them and the auctioneer needs to educate them on it. But B, the pricing is the major issue for an underwrite. But last Thursday, where we now, we're Wednesday, so almost a week ago, we underwrote something for £600,000 and it sold in auction for £662,000. So net, we probably made £27,000 for just guaranteeing to buy it for 600. And let me state, underwriting isn't always that profitable. I would say 80 to 85% of underwriters win the property at their underwritten price, and that is really the function of it. If it goes for more, that's nice. It's not guaranteed, but it's a nice instrument, mechanism, toy to use in negotiating and saying, well, to the vendor, look, if you think it's worth more, put your money where your mouth is. Underwrite it for me at this, and if it sells for more, you get 50% of the uplift. I get 50% of the uplift. So
I think it's probably worth putting a bit of a health warning onto this particular segment, just saying underwriting is a very sophisticated auction strategy, not for the faint-hearted, not for those that are not well capitalized and able to put their money where their mouth is. And I think if you want to explore these strategies early, I think what we're going to do is signpost them some of your further work, Jay, so that people, you know, if they do want to delve into the auction space, you know, they can do it in an informed way.
Yes,
I would highly recommend that. Let's do a couple of quick fire.
Very responsible of you, because
I do try, Jay. I do try. Well, you know, you know, how often have you heard in a property meeting, you know, and I say this without any criticism, but someone, you know, obviously we invest in Leeds, we live in Leeds, but someone from outside of Leeds saying, basically, the houses are really cheap. We're going to buy one of these cheap houses in the auction, all will be well. And I'm saying, well, look, you know, who have you got? Who's had a look at it for you? What do you know about the area? You know, and very often the answers aren't very constructive. And I don't say that with any sense of criticism. It's just, you know, it's a high risk environment. We're all grown up, so we need to, you know, focus on that. But moving on, a couple of quick fire questions for you, Jay. So
yes,
two little like opposing case studies, but like in a very high level. Somebody turns to you to seek your advice, your wisdom. They are relatively new to the property space. They are honest. They are, reasonably credible in their wider life, and they come with good intentions. But they come to you and say, "Look, Jay, I really need to sort of raise my first £200,000. I don't have like an abundance of assets to offer up as security, but I come in really good faith. What kind of advice would you give me, Jay, to raise that first £200,000? Any thoughts top of mind if you were approached with that question?"
I mean, I would trade because I'm heavily biased.
Yeah.
But I mean, so the thing is, if you're building up a portfolio, it can take time unless you know a lot of tips and tricks and you can game the system ethically, which is possible and people do it. But the numbers that do it are super low. It's rare. But trading creates what we had an event last Friday and we invited a guy called Paul Ribbons to speak. And Paul is a trader, Kent based, hilarious guy, really switched on. And he said something that, and I'm quoting him and I'm giving them credit for the quote, but I'm stealing it 110%. He goes, everyone asks for passive income. Everyone asks for passive income. He goes, passive income doesn't exist. There's no such thing as passive income. He goes, you can have passive income. I'm going to have massive income. And that's what you create when you trade. You can buy a property for 150 and sell it for 175. You've made £25,000. If you were renting that property, it would take you close to 3 years to make £25,000, and all of the mess that can come with that. Now, I'm not saying there's a right way or a wrong way, but if you're looking at building up a capital pot fairly quickly, trading is one of the ways to do it. Now, mentioning health checks, this is difficult stuff to do. In a rising market, it's easier, right? It used to be like 2007, 2006, 2007, you'd buy something for X, and then by the time you completed it was worth 60 grand more. So all you had to do was trade it on. So, when I said I was making stupid money, it's because it was easy. The environment was conducive of it. It's not so much now. You really have to be buying close to the bone. And we're big fans of leaving meat on the bone for everybody, but margins are tighter, so you have to cut far closer to the bone. You have to know how to structure your trade. Are you going to do a back-to-back? Are you doing it as an assisted sale? Are you structuring it as an option, which can be problematic? How are you running it? Are you doing auction to auction? Are you buying it from one auction and planting it into another, hoping to make a margin? There was a space for that, and there's far less space for it now. Trading is how I would build that pot of 200K.
So that's really useful in terms of strategy, in terms of direction. I suppose just to drill down a layer further, obviously this person is going to need, I suppose what I'm trying to get to is this person is going to need working capital in order to make progress. I know we see, lots of advertising around no money down and all this, so let's leave that to one side. But the harsh reality for most businesses is they need operating capital, they need working capital. So if somebody has listen to you and think, well, actually, I like this. I feel like I'm a trader. I feel like this. I understand the psychology of it. I think I can cope with it. But they don't yet have that seed capital to undertake their first transaction. Where would you suggest they look for it? How would they get started in reality?
I know some people, and there's mixed results on this, but I know people where there is one party with the money and no time, and one party with the time but very little money. The time and the knowledge and the eye to be able to get a deal done. And so joint venturing is one way to do it, but joint venturing is getting married to somebody. So you need to make sure you know that person well enough. You can reach out to family and friends. I think when I started, the first deposit I got was from family. That was a 10% deposit. And if you're looking to trade, some of the trades that we do, we offer a 10% deposit on exchange. Sometimes we offer a nominal fee like £5,000 to exchange. And then if you back to back that, then all you really need is the £5,000 plus the legals, to get the deal done. So, I mean, if you're a beginner and, you want to get to £200,000, having £10,000 available and the gumption to get a deal done and to work it, it's possible. It's bloody difficult, but if you've got that right kind of mindset and you go, right, actually, if Jay can do it, then any bloody person can do it. And that's a guarantee. If you're motivated the right way, and you're cognizant of your surroundings. When I say cognizant of your surroundings, that you're aware of what the seller needs, you're aware of what you need to do on your sale part, you're aware of how your buyer is going to behave, and you can see all the bits where that can trip up or you're not sure, and you can ask the stupid questions, then you can get it done. 100% you can get it done.
And then let's look at like a case study from a totally other perspective, which is somebody at a different stage of life. Let's say they've sold a business, or they've retired from whatever they were doing, and they're sat on £1 million. Now, I've had like reasonably high profile property trainers say to me, Paul, £1 million is nothing nowadays. You'd have to work a lot harder than that. Let's just leave that to one side. Let's say £1 million is still a lot of money and still enough to make some decent progress if. What suggestions would you have for somebody who's looking for a return on that kind of capital, but is not at that kind of earlier stage of life, and this is their retirement capital, this is to look after them in their dotage? What kind of, obviously this is not financial advice, but what direction would you send them in?
Well, I mean, kind of like the deal I mentioned where I'm ignoring the auctioneer for very specific reasons, is commercial on the ground floor, let on a 20-year lease to a major kind of national company with, more than 10 flats above. Okay, that it's a £2 million plus price point, but if you've got £1 million, that's a 50% LTV. You can do that deal, and it's probably going to net you about 7%. But it's in a good capital appreciation area. That's important. Rents are increasing. I don't see that abating anytime soon, especially with all of the wage price increases. And, multi-unit freehold blocks, I'm just a fan of in general, because if you're a little bit shy of capital, you can sell a couple of the flats off and keep the income from the rest. You've got the commercial on the ground floor, which is a really good asset split. You own the whole thing as a freehold. Maybe you can do a development in the roof space. It's a highly flexible asset class to have. And in that respect, if I had £1 million and I was doing that deal, I would be happy with that deal.
Very good.
Because the debt, you could service the debt, and it's a capital appreciation, and the rents are going to carry on going up. I don't think you can go too far wrong.
Cool. Okay, so let's begin to kind of glide us to a conclusion, because I appreciate you have auction work to do. I know that you've got quite a handful of deals going through, and whilst it may be strategic for you to ignore that phone call, I do actually want you to be able to answer that phone call in due course. So if we glide to the beginnings of a conclusion, and I'm really grateful for all of your time today and for the wisdom that you've shared with us, and we are going to signpost people to resources so they can learn a bit more about you and explore the work that you do. I suppose a question that I'd like to begin to kind of round off to you, and this doesn't necessarily need to focus entirely on property, but like, what is most important to you right now, Jay? Like, what's most important to you? What are you kind of optimized for, if that's to put it in a more technology sense? But like, as we bring this to our conversation to a conclusion, what's really important to you now?
Well, I try not to fragment things or put too much of an order of priority into things, but we have a 4-word saying in our business at the moment, which I think applies to our lives in general. It's just don't fuck it up. And that's it. Don't fuck it up. What's important? What is important is I don't fuck this up. Okay. And this could be anything. Jay, what's important? I can't fuck up my marriage. Okay, good. What's important? My daughter's got some a rare genetic disorder and some other things. I'm just going to make sure that she's looked after. So don't fuck that up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's going on in the business? Doesn't matter. We're going to make it work. Just don't fuck it up. And
Mm-hmm.
everything comes down to the, it's not a do or die, but it's there is no margin to fuck it up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's important. That's what we underline everything with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's super important. That's probably the most important thing at the moment. And it applies to everything that we do.
I think that's very profound life advice, Jay. In 4 words, explicit as it is, I will have to put a warning on this podcast. If you're happy, just in a sentence or two, I suppose, if we could hover over. So your daughter is called Abby, and she has
Yes.
a very, very, very rare genetic condition, which I understand there's only something like 700 people in the world have. Is that?
Yeah, we've just tripped the 700 mark. When Abby was diagnosed, it was just over 600.
So just give us a sentence or two about that. And what I'm going to do is I'll also post a couple of resources so people can explore it further if it's something that's relevant to them.
Yeah, so she has something called DIRK1A syndrome. It's along the same lines as, so it's on the same branches as Down syndrome, but where Down syndrome splinters off here, DIRK1A splinters off here. So it's not that she has extra chromosomes, it's that she has chromosomal deletions. So there are things that are missing from the genetic code. That can present itself in many different ways, but the majority of the kids that have it all suffer from the same things. It's non-verbal, neurological global delays, which we used to call back in the day, learning difficulties, or it also encompasses autism and Asperger's. It comes with quite a few other things. So issues with growth hormones. She's quite a smaller stature. She's got hypertension, which is kind of like constricted muscles. She has balance issues. She has eye issues. She has stomach issues. When she was born, she had several large holes in her heart, most of which, or now all of which, closed up naturally, which is brilliant. We have been on prophylactic antibiotics for over 2 years. She's going to turn 4 soon. She will grab a sickness and a cold if someone passed within a mile of having an issue. She just picks it up. Then we have to go into stronger antibiotics, and she doesn't sleep well. There's loads of things. She is she is shockingly just a very happy little girl, which is an absolute blessing. Which is an absolute blessing. And I have no idea how she does it. So,
well, it's because she's got you and her mum, I would imagine.
Yeah, just profoundly proud of her. So, and she smiles, and even when she's really not well or in hospital, she just smiles. So, yes, so there's that, and
I saw in a post that you mentioned a BBC series called There She Goes. Now, in the post, you basically said you hadn't quite had the fortitude to watch it yet. Have you managed to watch that, or is that still on the list?
No, God, no. I've met the guy who wrote the storyline for it. Obviously, spoiler alert or spoiler warning for most people who have only watched season 1 or part of season 2 is the girl that has the difficulties in that show is diagnosed to having DIRK1A. The guy who wrote it, his daughter has DIRK1A. Apparently it's brilliant. It's got David Tennant in it, so how could it not be brilliant? And it's got that lady, she was in the It Crowd and a couple of other things. She's also brilliant. I can't watch it. I talk about it and I get emotional. I don't know if I don't know if I can watch it, but definitely go and watch it. Apparently it's brilliant.
Look, we will do it on your behalf, Jay. It's a bridge too far right now for you, but we'll do it. So in the show notes, I'm going to put a link to the article Rare Chromo. and I'm going to put a link from the National Library of Medicine. So if people want to explore these topics further, it seems like those are two places to go. And interestingly, the heart, an orange heart is the symbol apparently for the condition. Is that right?
Yeah, so orange is kind of like the color. I don't know how that came about, but and then obviously the parents kind of co-opted the orange heart symbol as the thing for it. So yeah, yeah, I don't know what the background to that is actually, but yeah, the orange heart is the symbol. So yeah,
So
drop an orange heart. That would be amazing.
if you've enjoyed the podcast, drop an orange heart wherever you have found it, if there is a facility to do that. Look, Jay, where can I send these good people to connect with you and learn a bit more? Do you want me to send them to Facebook? Do you want me to send them to your website? Do you want me to send them to the YouTube that you do your Sunday morning sessions on? Is it all of the above?
The website is great because it will always tell people what we're doing. We run a couple of workshops on auctions just because the mistakes that people make, it's unnecessary if you know you, and no one's going to tell you, and we charge a pretty penny for it, so I'm not going to pretend like it's a cheap thing, but it's 2 days. I love the 2 days because I get to go to my favorite place where they do a buffet lunch. So not that I'm completely motivated by food, but that's great. That's coming up in October, and we do it once or twice a year. We're not property educators. It's not like a big thing that we do, but we just do it to make sure that if people are going to access auctions, that they follow rule number one and they don't lose their money. So we don't promise like a no money down thing, or you're going to be a millionaire at the end of this. It's just it's practical. It's all based around case studies. It's based around our experience, and that's cool. But so the website and LinkedIn are probably the two easiest ways for people to get hold of me.
Yeah. Brilliant. I shall do that. Well, look, all that remains for me to say to you, Jay, is look, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an eye-opening conversation, and you've taken us in directions I can honestly say were not in my notes. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me, Paul.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on the Property and Investor podcast. If you want to discuss anything in this podcast, you're always welcome to join me at a Property and Investor breakfast online or on Zoom. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please follow, subscribe, like, comment on it, leave a special orange heart on this occasion if you're listening to it on social media. Thank you so much for listening. Keep well, and we'll speak very soon.